Live in 5, 4.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 26th, 2013 North Idaho College Board of Trustees meeting. Would you all join the board, please, in our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Solemnly swear to defend.
Let me verify for the record that we have a quorum. Everyone is in attendance this evening, and I do not have anybody that signed up as a guest. So move on to the agenda item of the minutes review and approval. Has everyone had an opportunity to receive and review the minutes from the last meeting? Any questions or any motions?
Go ahead, Todd.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Todd?
Just a couple comments. As I was reviewing the meeting minutes for the May 22nd meeting and had reviewed the May 13th for the budget workshop, when we look at the budget workshop, I thought it could be emphasized a little more, the position that was taken by the President's Council and Ms. Hill regarding the need or lack thereof, at least for 1 year, of the step increase. And why I say that is because then when we look into the meeting minutes on the 22nd, there was extended discussion. I would suggest to you a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe more, as that step subject was brought up on 2 different occasions, leading to votes and such, and then even an additional motion of possibly a property tax increase. And I think those are very important things, and people need to know that there's debate going on and discussion, and I just don't know that the minutes accurately reflected that. When I look at it, I look at the paragraph on page 5, and it talks about Trustee Wood commenting on the college not in a budget crisis, and she felt implementing the salary step increases were important. And then she did a thing, and Trustee Meyer seconded. And then there's this little paragraph that says, a discussion ensued regarding potential methods for funding step increases. Well, that's a very, very benign, generic sentence. But yet, the truth of it is that was an extended discussion that took up a significant amount of time during our meeting. And there were some things discussed and said, one being the example of a potential property tax increase that I think is a tremendously important item that should be noted, and that people would like to be aware of, that those discussions are ongoing, and that those are the type of topics, those are things that we are addressing, whether they're approved or not, just that they're out there. And so I guess on some of these things, I would just like to see maybe a little more detail on some of these more sensitive items that we're discussing. I think we should give them a little short shrift on a couple of the minutes, and to give the background, because it kind of makes the board a little bit in a negative light, when the reality is we'd gone through all this in the budget workshops, which we met several times, and Ms. Hill stood up, and Mr. Dorn and the folks in the President's Council, and I said, hey, you know what? We're in the top half of the third, and we did this survey, and we're way ahead of the 2 other junior colleges. They're in the bottom third with what they're paying, and we could probably be okay if we forego this for 1 year. And I think that was really de-emphasized, and it looks like that the board kind of arbitrarily said, okay, we're just going to draw this line and on our own not approve this. And so I would just like to see more context and a little more explanation on the discussion. Expansion.
Let me, I mean, your comments are good comments about the kind of detail we would like to make sure that the public is aware of. But minutes are, by their nature, designed to be sort of an outline of the actions that were taken, and not necessarily a word for word or even an issue by issue description, but simply an outline. So if somebody really wants to know, they can go back to the record, and our record here is this videotaped session. So we do have a word-for-word verbatim record of exactly what was done. And if you want to make sure that something in the minutes are adequate to direct people to the full record, we can amend the minutes, and that's why we do this right now in terms of bringing this up. If you have a suggestion for an amendment, either now or later on, actually, then please, just let me know, and we can amend the minutes to include some language that will direct people to the proper record, to more fully describe what we did. Is that okay?
Yes, sir, and you're right, it is a bit of an outline. What happens, though, unfortunately, is a lot of people aren't going to wade through the three and a half hour videotape on a delayed basis, and so they'll look at this as a synopsis of what occurred at these various meetings, because these are posted for public record. That's all. So you're right.
And that's why, if you feel that something more is needed in the minutes, this is our opportunity to amend the minutes and get them adopted by the board as a whole. If you don't have an amendment right now, then let's move ahead with approving the minutes. We can go back and amend them later on if you have some kind of a suggested amendment.
I do not have a prepared amendment at this time, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that we approve the minutes for May 13th, May 22nd. I was absent on June 10th, but I've read them, and I think they're a reflection of what they were, so I would make a motion that we approve these minutes.
Second?
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next agenda item is public comment. Nobody signed up for public comment. But we do have the Celebrating Success presentation. And Mark, are you going to introduce that?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And while you're walking up to the microphone there, let me suggest that we are a little light on administrative people here tonight. And for all those folks that are maybe watching the videotape or listening to it, this is somewhat by design, because most of the administration had to go to a accreditation meeting that was held simultaneously almost with this board meeting. But was it Portland or is it Seattle? Seattle. Yeah. And so we're not able to be here tonight, and that's why we have the two of you here representing the entire administrative staff.
The JV string is here, Coach, but we're ready to play. We'll take our shot.
So with that heavy mantle on your shoulders, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you can notice, I'm standing in tonight for Vice President Stanley. I do not have his fashion sense nor the ability to pull it off, so it is what it is. I was just lucky to find a tie, but
Thank you.
In the summer,
Yeah.
especially.
It is my pleasure to introduce Marcia Need, who works in the Auxiliary Service Office, which is under Vice President Stanley in the Student Services Suite. Marcia's been with the college for 30 years now, which I believe is a reason to celebrate success in and of itself, because she represents the kind of dedication and passion for craft that people who work here for that amount of time, they just embody. But Marcia is the coordinator for the Cardinal One Card system, which has been, I think will be the focus of her report tonight. Really has been a tremendous success. But she also does all the billing and handles all the transactions for the residence hall, which, so you can imagine, as you're getting all the cards going in, dealing with residence hall contracts, and then everything else, it just filters in through the front door in auxiliary services, that she really has her plate full, and she does it each and every day with a smile on her face. I've never seen her have a tense look nor word to anyone, and she's done it for 30 years. So it's my pleasure, Mr. Chairman of the Board, to introduce Marcia Need. So.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Howard and the board members, for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about an exciting new service here on campus. Hopefully you each received your new Cardinal card. That's our new ID card on campus. We are proud to announce the opening of the new Cardinal Card Office and Information Center. Maybe you noticed it as you walked into the Student Union this evening. It's on the right-hand side, right as you walk into the Student Union. This office is a production center for the new Cardinal card and also the new Information Center for the entire campus. As you can see, the location of this office is very convenient for anyone walking into our building. As a matter of fact, as we were setting up the office and putting our equipment out there, people were constantly coming up and asking us questions. We're going, we're not ready yet. But that was exciting to me because it made me realize we are in the right location to help our customers. The card office serves the dual purpose of being the ID photo and card production station, as well as the information center for the entire campus. Many departments are currently sending us information about services and activities in their departments. Because the new Cardinal card is now more than just an ID card, it is an ID card with services attached. The production of this card has moved from the computer labs under IT services and is now a new department within auxiliary services. The purpose of the Cardinal card is to eliminate the multiple cards on campus to increase security and convenience of services to cardholders. With this card, we have already eliminated a separate card for building and room access on campus and meal cards for dining services. New services starting fall semester will be room and building access on our ID cards. A new service called Get Funds is a 24/7 online service in which cardholders can add money to their Cardinal card, and we are calling this Cardinal Cash. Students can even request from their parents or grandparents to add money to their cards, which I'm sure they will. These monies can be used for purchases in the Student Union dining services, including the market, the Educated Cup espresso bar, Nick at Night, the convenience store in the residence hall for our students living on campus, and also purchases in the Micah Peak Exchange bookstore. We hope to have printing services in the library also available this fall. As you can see, the potential for future services is very exciting. Now that the systems are being integrated and software purchased, we can look forward to developing new services for everyone with a Cardinal card. Not only are the cardholders given better service, but the departments on campus can also utilize the card for logging students in and out, which gives statistical information about customer usage. We've accomplished a lot in the short time we've been open by producing cards for our summer camps that are staying in our residence hall. We are in the process of recarding all employees so they can start enjoying the services this fall. ORS, or orientation and registration, is also keeping us very busy here during the summer, carding them for coming this year. And finally, during the remainder of the summer, we're completing software purchases and installations that will integrate all the major components together to have these new services ready for when school starts. We're really excited to have the Cardinal card and auxiliary services. And as you can see, there are a lot of opportunities for the Cardinal card to simplify the campus life of students, employees, and visitors. Thank you again for this opportunity. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Can this card be used if they were to choose to increase the security here? Can this card also be used at a mandatory check-in and check-out when coming on and off the campus?
It could be, yes. That's not something we have available yet, but yes, it will be. We do have 3 buildings on campus that have currently have electronic access, so that's really going to start helping security. We can monitor who's coming in and out of buildings, and also if a key is lost, we can immediately deactivate it instead of a lost key out there somewhere.
Todd?
I actually have a couple questions. When you issue these to, say, campers, is there somewhere on there where it says like an expiration date, or they're only for a certain duration?
Yes, that's for the camp that's here during that time period.
So it will say on there?
Mhm.
Now,
It doesn't say an expiration date on the card, no.
okay. Well, are we, is our goal to eventually have every student have this on him as they enter into a classroom for?
Yes, our goal is
Tell
to
if they
have
belong.
every employee, every student, visitors that come on campus, everyone to have that ID card.
Okay, then I guess I'll go back to my first question then. How will we differentiate if one of these is expired or not then? How would you know that?
Well, within the system, we can look it up.
So
and-
if I scan it somewhere or somebody checks it, they would know?
Yes, it knows whether you're valid or expired.
Okay. And so is that a requirement that we've put on for, say, the fall term, that everybody has one of these, or is it voluntary or optional at that point?
Well, I think we're working towards that. I don't know the mandate has come down yet that it's mandatory, but we are wanting everybody to do that, yes.
If they have it, they belong, and if they don't, they don't?
Yeah.
Okay.
We want security to be able to ask somebody, show us who you are, and have them show their ID.
Christie?
Thank you. Well, Ron, you had worked toward this for a long time, so congratulations. My question is, we are going to have a lot of statistics that will be very interesting to us. So are you looking at maybe, when can you give us our first report on that? After the first semester? On,
I'll be able to give you one at the end of the first semester. I think working in conjunction with student services, it's a work in progress. We've got money in on our state request to electronically key more of the buildings, and as we get through that, it'll just encompass more and more items. And I know Graves is looking at that with the new vending services contract, to have this card be able to use, be swiped in the vending machine on campus also. So incrementally we'll expand it to include almost all facets of campus.
and then you said that the card can be loaded with extra money, and so I need to know how to get access to Ron's card. You can just email me that.
Okay, all right, I will do that.
Just tell her I'll give her the $3.
Yes, Ron.
So you come in and you scan your card, and then it just identifies you on there. Is there a display screen that will display your picture at the same time that you scan it? The reason I ask is in our company that we have these as well, and one of the things is it's your time in, time out, and so it's very important that the person that's using the car is a person that's doing it. So we've now got it to the point where their picture flashes to make sure that there's no misuse of the card. And so if somebody finds a card and says, well, I'm going to go in and go see what they have as far as money available on there, if there's a screen that comes up on that, it might be some way to be able to do this. So I don't know, is that in the plans?
Well, we're just in the baby phases right now. We're trying to recard everybody, and our first step is getting Cardinal Cash for people to be able to use it for purchases. But those are on the list for the future, definitely. We're gonna look at all of our options out there and try to use this just to the most that we can.
Picture is on the card, though. It would be on all the cards, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions? If I told my wife that the perfect Christmas gift is for her to put money on my card, she can do that, right?
You can put in that request online 24/7 for your wife to add money to your card.
Good. And then I can buy a latte with it.
That's right.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions? Marcia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now have an opportunity for a special report, and Trustee Meyer, would you introduce the guest, please?
Happily so, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, and college community, you've heard me speak before about the Idaho Business for Education Group, and this evening you get to meet our founder, Skip Oppenheimer, and the new full-time president and CEO, Rod Grammer. Don't you like an education group with a leader whose name is Grammer? IBE is made up of about 80 CEOs and business leaders from around the state who are dedicated to joining with educational institutions, parents, teachers, students to ensure that education matches up with the business needs of the state. Our board, and you've heard us before as well, are well aware of the Georgetown study, which shows that by 2020, 7 years from now, more than 60% of Idaho jobs will require some level of post-secondary education. Currently, only 34% of Idaho's 25 to 34-year-olds now meet that criteria. Although many businesses and therefore many CEOs are in the Boise area, IBE wants to reach out around the state and include more business leaders and expand IBE's presence by traveling around the state to meet with local business leaders. Since it's the community colleges who have a major role in providing the post-secondary education programs, I thought it would be good to connect our board with the leaders of IBE. To explain how IBE came about, I'd like to introduce Skip Oppenheimer, who's the CEO of the Oppenheimer Companies, a diverse national company with interests in food processing and marketing, as well as commercial real estate. Skip has been a relentless champion for improving Idaho's education system. Skip has volunteered his time and energy, as well as his business staff, to launch and maintain IBE's efforts. Thank you, Skip, for your generous efforts. And Skip, if you'll come on up, I'll have him introduce our new full-time president and CEO, Rod, in a minute. It's going to be Rod whose charge it is to carry out all these organizations' efforts while all the CEOs are busy keeping those CEO companies going. Skip, come tell us about IBE. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much. And Chairman Howard and members of the board, it's a particular pleasure for us to be here and have the opportunity to hopefully have some dialogue. And we know we have a fairly tight time frame, so we're going to try to be sure we stick with that. But hopefully have some dialogue back and forth. As you'll hear, I think, hopefully more about, one of the fundamental core underpinnings of the IBE from the beginning was the belief in the critical importance of students going on to some form of post-secondary ed, and we'll talk more about some of those ideas and definitions as we give our presentation. But to have an opportunity to be here to speak with the board of North Idaho College with the work you're doing, which I think is not only critically important to the current education environment, but I think, and you probably recognize this better than anyone, is going to, in our view, become even more critical, more important as we look at where the state and the nation's going in terms of the role of the community colleges and where kind of employment needs are as we look ahead into the 21st century. So, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. We appreciate it. As Judy said, the idea of the IBE, which started 7 or 8 years ago, was to be a statewide organization. And with our kind of next chapter evolving, and we'll talk a little more about that, we're making a very strong effort to try to make sure we have a broad kind of foundation of membership throughout the state. Judy's been involved with this organization almost literally from the beginning. Judy's our regional chair for Northern Idaho. We have regional chairs in the Magic Valley area. We have regional chair in Eastern Idaho, and we have regional chair in the Treasure Valley. So part of the whole concept here is to make sure that we not only have a strong base of membership for effecting public policy, hopefully, but also so we can all learn from each other and try to understand not only the diverse needs of the state, but how can we as a business community be more effective in hopefully furthering the needs of education in this state. And that's another reason that we're looking at continuing to grow the statewide nature of this organization. So thanks again for giving us time here today. Let me introduce just briefly some of the other members of our team that are here. As Judy said, Rod Grammer joined us when? Like 2 months, 3 months?
Tax day.
April 15th.
Taxing
Yeah,
day.
appropriate. Yeah. And Rod, we are absolutely thrilled to have as our first full-time president and CEO of the IBE. Rod, we went through an interview process, kind of narrowed it down to 3 candidates, and the interview team interviewed all 3, and by acclamation, although all 3 were great choices, Rod was the absolute choice. And Rod's background, just very briefly, he was a native Idahoan. His wife's also a native Idahoan from Gooding. Grew up in Boise, became a reporter and then a news director at the editorial page editor at the Idaho Statesman. Went on to become the news director at the KTVB NBC affiliate at Channel 7 in Boise. Then went to Portland, ran the news department at a large station there, and then to Tampa, where he was the CEO, the news director, and or not the news director, he was the general manager of the Tampa station. I was also the CEO of the 24-hour news channel, Hispanic channel in Tampa and Orlando. So he brings not only a passion for education and a real love of the state, but also some great skills in terms of running large-scale organizations, and also understands the media to the extent anyone understands the media. Rod does, which is a great help to us, and also, I think, a very astute observer and participant in the political arena. Diana Laciondo is our executive director. Diana has been with us for, it seems like, I'm sure longer, but how long has it been? What? A year. During an interesting transition where, as you'll hear, we're trying to ratchet up the visibility and hopefully the effectiveness of this organization. Diana, for much of that year, really literally ran the whole organization and has just done a superb job, and we're just thrilled to have her as a member of our team. And Diana is the vice president of special projects, and it will be very involved in development and membership. So we're very pleased to have her here tonight as well. And Kathy Hagler is a consultant that we're going to ask to give you just a brief summary of a survey that we've done that we'll talk a little more about in a few minutes. Kathy is nationally known in quality improvement, worked with Edward Deming, Peter Drucker, people like that, lives in Boise, and again, we're thrilled to have her on board as a consultant. So we'll hear more from those folks here in just a minute. Let me see if I can get this to work. So what is the Idaho Business for Education? And that's a question that we'll try to give you a little bit of fabric around tonight. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan group. There's 85 members, most of the larger corporations in the state, as well as many mid-sized and smaller, that really do care about the quality of Idaho's public education system and the direct connection between that education system and our state's economy. Our mission is to be a driving force in the development of an Idaho education system that results in graduates who have post-secondary credentials and who are workforce ready. And I think we all understand, what that challenge is. We'll talk a little more about that in just a few minutes here. So why are we concerned as business leaders? And many of you on the board qualify, probably all of you, as business leaders. A national study shows that by 2018, as Judy mentioned, 60% of Idaho's jobs are going to require some form of post-secondary ed, and that could be a certificate, it could be a associate degree, it could be a bachelor's degree, but we've got to do a better job as a state of getting more kids to go on to some form of post-secondary ed that prepares them effectively for the workforce needs of the 21st century. The current percentage, as Judy mentioned, is 34% of those 25 to 34-year-olds that hold a post-secondary degree, so we have a gap that we're all going to have to focus on to hopefully move that dial closer and ultimately to that 60% goal with about a 26% gap. And actually, we just got that Georgetown study was just updated, and we just got a set of numbers that, without getting buried in the numbers here, but that actually moves that, on a national basis, that percentage up significantly higher. So that particular target is probably going to become even more challenging, but also more important than ever. We have done a workforce needs study that we want to tell you a little bit about. We wanted to hear directly from Idaho employers to see how their workforce needs square with that of the national study. We were challenged by the President's Council 7 or 8 months ago to try to help look at where the needs are within this state. And we all see a lot of national needs and so on, but how could we take the employers in the state of Idaho and be a little more clear about what the needs of us as employers are to give higher ed, post-secondary ed, a better sort of set of targets that could be very specific to this state and to this current environment that we're in economically. We've had 237 employers from across the state who have responded, and we're going to use that data to inform the discussion, hopefully to help inform the discussion and create an opportunity literally for all of us to work together around some of those needs that, again, get more specific around the state, and you'll hear more about that in just a few minutes. I'm going to turn it over now. Before I do that, let me just give a quick personal note. We're all involved in education for different reasons, and I think as employers, we all understand the need we have to continue to hopefully improve the quality of graduates that come out of the various components of the state education system. My family, as I'm sure this is true of many, and in fact, we were all telling individual stories on our way over here tonight. We all have our stories, but on a personal level, my family, literally in the 1860s, not me, but my great-grandfather showed up in Boise, Idaho, 16-year-old kid from Germany, ended up pushing a cart, selling stuff, ultimately got into the department store business, as happened in many, many cities around the West. And we've been in Idaho continually ever since. All of our kids, my brother, Doug, myself, haven't been able, one of them, our youngest son, Matt Oppenheimer, wanted to start a business in Boise or in Idaho, came back to Boise, literally couldn't find the people he needed. And it's hard enough, as you all know, to get a startup going without having to move people. And because he couldn't find the employment base for what he needed as a tech industry, it's an international money transfer business that requires quite a bit of technological sort of backgrounded people. Couldn't find him, moved to Seattle, has now bought a house in Seattle. We're hoping to get him back, but that's just one of thousands of examples. Bob Locken, who's our vice chair and a key leader, couldn't be here tonight, but is a fabulous entrepreneur, has built 2 or 3 companies now. The one that he's just before the one he's in starting now was Pro Clarity. He built that in Idaho. He sold it to Microsoft. Microsoft moved with a commitment from Microsoft that they were going to, he thought, stay in Idaho. Ended up basically after 2 years with Microsoft saying they couldn't find basically the pool of talent they needed, and moved literally the entire operation to Seattle. So those are all stories we've all had plenty of examples of, but there's an urgency here, there's an opportunity here. We think there's a window here that hopefully we can all collectively work on and have some good success around. So we'll come back with some more, and Rod will also give you some more, and then I'll come back and have some more comments as well. But Kathy, I'll turn it over to you. We'll give you a brief summary of the survey. Rod will make a few comments, and we'll take questions and hopefully have some discussion.
Great. Thanks. Mr. Chairman and board members, I was thinking about the presentation tonight as I was looking at the board, and I wanted to tell you that this is kind of a milestone for me. My life all along has been about the connection between work and learning. And I worked at a community college for about 15 years as an administrator. Moved to Idaho then 15 years ago and became a consultant after, actually Peter Drucker was my major advisor at Claremont. And so I had some really wonderful opportunities. And finally tonight I'm representing business and not education. I've always been on the other side. So tonight I feel like I've sort of graduated and I'll be able to look at sort of the connection from both sides. So I was very pleased to be invited to do this survey. It's a very exciting survey. We would like to ask people to have more respondents. We have, as we said, 247 at this point. What we found out is not going to be a surprise. And that the first thing that we found out is that the Idaho CEOs, and by the way, 75% of those who responded were CEOs or senior management of their organizations in Idaho throughout the state. And the first thing that we found out is that what they're saying is that Idaho citizens without a high school diploma have a really grim future. They're saying 6% of the CEOs that responded and the people that responded, they said 6% of our workforce will be actually people without a high school diploma. And it was even really worse than that because very few of the industries that we looked at, and we had a really wide scope of industries that participated, said that they would hire people without a high school diploma. So then we move into the next stage, which was, what about those people with just a high school diploma? And what they're saying is we want to hire, we'll hire about 30% of our people will be hired that just have a high school diploma. But what we're saying is that there's not going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be available that just need high school diplomas. So when I show you the areas where they're saying they have a need, most of those are not just for high school diplomas. And then you take it to another level, which was exciting for me, having a community college background. But what they're saying is 58% said, we want to hire people, we'll hire people that have workforce-ready certificates. And I was thinking, that can be a lot of different things, and I know even now, it's kind of a fine line between high school and community colleges or high school and certification. So some of the students that are coming out of high school are almost ready for certification. So I think the line is very fine on this, but what they're saying is they need a certification. 58% are saying that in some of the industries. 70% of the respondents said 70% of the people we hire will need an associate, baccalaureate, or higher degree. And that 60% is what they were saying, and then it's actually higher than that at this point. With the new Georgetown study, they're saying even more than that are requiring it. But of our employers, they're saying 70% of the people that we hired will need some kind of degree, associate, baccalaureate, or advanced degree. Now, in addition to that, I just want to run through this quickly. I know we don't have a lot of time. These are the 5 toughest jobs to fill, in their opinion. The first one on a statewide basis was office and administration. And just as a side note, what they're saying on this one, they're looking mostly for people with office and administration to have high school degrees, community college degrees, and some baccalaureate. No high school. The next one is sales and marketing. And again, that was an area where they were looking at having some high school degrees, community college, some college, and a little bit of baccalaureate. The computers and management and finance were almost all either certificates, community college, baccalaureate, or higher. So you can look at those last 3 and say they pretty much fell over in the area of having some kind of a credential, whether it's a certificate or whether it's a degree. Then this is Northern Idaho. And what we want to do, and one of the things that we're asking is that you also support us in, we want to get some more information from Northern Idaho people. We had a good response, but we'd like more. So we're going to leave the survey open, so that's why it's a preliminary finding. We would like to, and we're going to then come out, and Rod will talk a little bit about that and talk about how we're going to keep the survey open, because we still want to look for it. But in Northern Idaho, management was the top one that they said I had a hard time filling. Office and administration were next. And then you can see computer, business, and finance, and sales and marketing at the end. But management was the highest in Northern. And we're going to be doing this all around the state and then disaggregating the data so we can look at each piece of the state. The desired proficiencies, this was really interesting too. These are all based on the whole issue of the whole idea of 21st century skills. And what we did is there was a question that asked all about the 21st century skills. Which are the 5 most that are important for you? The first one statewide was that they need to be able to contribute to a team. And right along with that is they're saying not only contributing to a team, we really want to hire people that really care about lifelong learning. This whole issue of acquiring knowledge and continuous schooling and learning is really important to us. And then along with that, of course, communication orally and written was huge. And analyzing information. This is your Northern Idaho information. Their first one was we need people that really are able to acquire knowledge and that perform with integrity. Integrity was a big piece of the work. And I'm going to turn this back over to Rod, but if you have any questions at the end about the data, I would be happy to answer those as we go along.
So it's pretty clear from both the Georgetown study, Mr. Chairman, and our survey so far that it's very important for students to go beyond high school to get some kind of certification, some kind of associate degree, or some kind of bachelor's degree or more. So some of the things we're doing, and as you all know, this is the goal set by the State Board of Education. It's also the goal adopted by our organization to support that. So some of the things we're doing to meet that goal are that we're trying to shine the light on our educational challenges in Idaho and trying to educate Idahoans, raise public awareness that there is a need for change in our state. One of the most important things we're doing is collaborating with other education stakeholders to try to craft solutions to our educational issues. And it's really important to do things in a collaborative way and to work with these stakeholders. So we're trying to do that. And lastly, we are trying to be an advocate at the state and local level for positive changes that can improve the outcomes of our students from kindergarten through higher education. Specifically, we have 4 areas that we're working on. First of all, we serve on the Governor's Task Force on Education. Bob Locken, our vice chairman, is actually the chair of one of the 3 key subcommittees of the Governor's Task Force. And we plan to support the governor's initiatives. We don't know what those are going to be. We're hoping to shape those, but we're hoping to support those in the 2014 legislature. IBE meets every month with the governor. Skip and myself and Bob Locken, we spend an hour to an hour and a half every month meeting with Governor Otter about education. And I can tell you, he is highly engaged in this education issue and highly interested in it. And we hope to support him as we move forward. Secondly, we are trying to lead a broad coalition, diverse coalition of stakeholders who are in support of the implementation of the Idaho Core Standards, otherwise known as the Common Core Standards. As you know, there are many people that want to repeal the Common Core, the Idaho Core Standards, or to pause in terms of their implementation, which takes effect this fall. We believe the Idaho Core Standards are a foundation to whatever improvements we make in education in Idaho, and help us improve the rigors and prepare students for post-secondary education. Thirdly, we are really focused on third grade reading. As you all know, from kindergarten to third grade, you read to learn, or learn to read, and from fourth grade on, you read to learn. So if students are not proficient by fourth grade, it's an early indicator as to whether they're going to drop out of school or go on to post-secondary education. So we're working with a broad group of stakeholders in this area, and we're hoping that we can come up with policy changes in the next legislature that can reinforce and improve our reading scores here in Idaho. And lastly, as we just talked about, the President's Council asked us to try to get to Idaho employers and try to find out what their workforce needs are. And what we're hoping to do with the study when it's completed later this summer is come back to the President's Council and talk to the presidents about what the Idaho employers say they need in the workforce, and see if we can see how that aligns with the kind of degrees and the curriculum that the post-secondary institutions are operating under. See if we can get some alignment between those two things. So those are the four things that we're really focused on. Let me turn it back to Skip just briefly to summarize everything, and then we can answer questions from you.
Thanks, Rod. So why do we think we can make a difference and maybe hopefully be at least a piece to the puzzle here? This goes back to the kind of the initial founding of this organization that, as I said, Judy and others were very involved in. First of all, as business leaders, and again, I include those of you here, we really have no stake we don't work within the system of education. We really only have one stake, one goal here, and that is, how do we continue to improve outcomes for students? And one of the things we all sat around the table and decided when we first began this organization, and I think you'll see this organization going to a whole nother level of visibility and hopefully effectiveness over the next year or two, as now that we have full-time staff. But we also said, what the state maybe doesn't need is yet another group of business leaders who, 85 of whom come together, all of whom have 85 brilliant ideas with no idea what we're talking about. What we really do need, hopefully, is a constructive voice working with the people that do this for a living, the stakeholders in education, to help work together, because I think all of us in business recognize if you don't engage the people that do the heavy lifting in a meaningful way and, take some of the lead significantly from them and hopefully learn from each other, probably not much change is going to happen. So that was one of the sort of underlying principles. We also like to think that we're strategically minded and take the longer view. Political figures will come and go. As we looked around the country and found the most effective organizations, they were typically organizations who had a single focus in terms of business organizations working around and within the area of education. But they worked with, again, the stakeholders and had that longer term view that some of these things will take some time. Hopefully some of these things will be more urgently resolved. But if you're in it for the long term and you have a longer term point of view, you're willing to wait through and continue to work on issues that may not be solved with a particular political figure or a particular set of conditions. But that strategic view we think is important. As business leaders, I think in our DNA is this whole idea of data and outcomes. We're customer focused. What does that mean? To us, that means the customers mean internal customers, as I said, that working with stakeholders, bringing people together around the table, hopefully, to be a piece to the puzzle, all of us, to move forward around key strategic initiatives, and the external customers. Ultimately, why are we doing this? It ultimately boils down to those students, and how do we continue to hopefully enhance their opportunities for employment, which also furthers our opportunity to stay in the state and to continue to grow in this state and to attract other businesses, obviously, to this state. But how do we, continue to kind of connect with not only, and keep in mind that student, that individual student, as well as the people that are working in the arena, teachers, superintendents, professionals in the field. One of our kids is a second grade teacher, and he's also a professional mountain biker. But he loves teaching. He's taught for 13 years, and I go into his class, and it's in like thousands of other teachers. It's totally inspiring. And how do we continue to further and hopefully support those teachers that are doing a great job, just as one example. Responsibility and accountability, and that includes ourselves. How do we as a business, the survey is just maybe one example of this. I don't know that we felt that the business community holding ourselves accountable has done a great job of defining some of the needs that are out there. We've talked about the problems, but we haven't necessarily been real clear about what the needs are. Hopefully things like the survey, just to use that as one example, can kind of hold ourselves accountable for making sure we're doing our part in conveying some of the needs as clearly as we can, just as one example. Transparency, there are no secrets. We want to be open about everything we're doing, and also hopefully with the other stakeholders in this arena have that transparency come the other way. And again, business support, we work with IACI, we work with other business groups. Business support can often be a significant factor, we hope, in moving things along in terms of, in this case, hopefully education quality. Lastly, seizing the day, we're all, I think, trained as business leaders to look for and seize opportunities. We think there is a truly historic, we don't think this is an overstatement, opportunity with all the wrestling around that went on with Students Come First. The awareness about education issues probably has never been higher on the radar screen than it is today in this state. So we think there's a window. We think that window provides an opportunity. There's maybe a little bit of exhaustion. A lot of the stakeholders are kind of tired of, we're all tired, I think, of just lobbing grenades. How do we connect the dots and now move forward? There seems to be a lot of interest in doing that among a lot of the stakeholders. And so we think there's opportunities to develop coalitions similar to what Rod talked about. And we hope the result will be, ultimately, a continued higher educated workforce and a skilled workforce that meets the needs of a vital economy in this state. And we can't see how, and you all live this, it's hard to imagine a state's economy that's going to be very dynamic without a really significantly enhanced quality of education in the state. And this is a little bit, sounds like a cliche, but this idea that education is a passport to the American dream, we can make that passport available to every student in the state, and not only as employees, but as good citizens. Again, if we think if we all work together towards that goal and just be real smart about it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I hope we didn't take too much time. We'd love to entertain any questions. I know you've got a tight agenda, but we're here to answer any questions today or any other time, and we hope we can continue to connect the dots with you and with this organization, with this institution. So thank you very much.
I can see members of our trustee panel up here squirming in the seats, ready to ask you questions. So, Ron.
And the other parts of this organization will also help answer the questions.
Bring up the recruits.
Well, Skip, I don't even know where to begin. We had an hour-and-a-half roundtable discussion last week, and the good-looking guy at the end of the table, Mr. Mark Browning, was a facilitator. And this roundtable discussion was between 5 CEOs, diversified CEOs from KMC to some manufacturing businesses throughout Kootenai County. And we had discussions talking about economic development and what we can do, education partnerships with there. So we had a roundtable discussion, which was quite educational. But during that process, one of the questions that was asked is the 60% goal, and I wrote down here is that we have a goal and some statistic that says 70% of these jobs in the future are going to require an AAS degree by 2020, And that wasn't what we heard. What was interesting is what we heard is we need a skilled and trained workforce, which doesn't necessarily mean an associate's degree or higher. And through this discussion that they had, that the discussion was pretty well directed, that says that stop trying to give us something we don't need. We do need financial people that have financial degrees. If you're a KMC, a Kootenai Medical, which is one of our largest employers here, of course, you need that education. But the jobs that have gone unfilled here are, a lot of these are the skilled and trained jobs that require less than a one-year certificate. And that clearly that at the higher level of our government in Boise and Washington, D.C., they set this goal to be a completion of a full 1 year, or this, and we keep hearing about the 60% by 2020, and we don't know where that's going to come from, because since then, a number of us have taken polls between some of the businesses here, and we've talked to 8 to 10 employers that all employ more than 50 people. And there isn't a single one of those that is requesting that for their company, for the jobs, positions they have today, that more than 10% of these jobs require this degree status that we're referring to. So, and that would be outside the accounting field, outside the medical field. But where the jobs in this community are, we don't see that demand. So when we set this goal of 60% of our students will achieve an associate's degree or higher to meet the demand, I'm not sure where the supply and the demand come from. So I'd like to get some feedback on that.
Good. Mr. Nielsen, maybe I can tackle that. Our goal is that 60% have some level of post-secondary education. This could be a certificate that's less than a year, could be a certificate that's a year, could be an associate degree. So this would fall under your category. Our goal is some post-secondary education, and that could be a certificate that's less than a year. And so we're very, the thing is that Idaho's a big state. There's lots of different needs. If you talk to Bob Locken, he has a great need for software engineers. If you talk to someone else, they have a great need for welders. You know, this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. There's a big tent here, and it starts with anything from less than a year certificate to a PhD. So I don't think there's a difference of opinion here at all.
Well, let me do a follow-up question is that if you read what has came from Washington and you read what's came from our State Board of Education, it clearly states anything short of a full 1 year certificate is not counted in that 60% goal that we have. So that there will be, and that's one of the concerns that we have, is that a 6-month focused certification, I don't care if it's being mechanical, machining or whatever, a certificate that says they've completed this, now they're employable, they're ready to go to work. But when you have a goal that says it has to be a completion of a full 1 year certification to be counted on this, that with that, the funding that comes from the state and from the federal government will reflect that, which means it makes it more difficult for an educational institution like NIC to be able to help these kids that don't need a full 1 year.
Well, we've had a lot of discussion about that in IBE, and I don't want to speak for Skip or for the board, but we've had a lot of discussion, and we're very acutely aware of your needs, the fact that there are certificates that are less than a year that are needed, and we believe will qualify for our goal toward the 60%. We can only speak for our goal at this point, but we've had a lot of discussion about this, and we recognize that. I had a conversation with Jeff Sayer, the Department of Commerce, about this because he was helping me understand your concerns. He is helping me understand his brother's concerns. And we've had a lot of discussion about this, and, you know, I think we recognize that some of these certificates will be less than a year.
And, you know, Ron, I think one of the, just quickly sort of tied into building on Rod's points, you know, one of the things we think maybe is happening out there, this is a dynamic process. I mean, and sometimes, including our organization, I think, and probably any organization, but without having all the facts, sometimes the direction's right, but the nuances and the texture and the detail of what some of these initiatives are need to be refined. And I think to your point, one of the things we're trying to do as a little, back to the accountability as part of the business community, is define more clearly what are the needs. And that's part of the idea of this survey. We had some statistics from the Albertson Foundation that really confirm your points. When you look at the growth in 4-year degree needs, and then you look at the 2-year, and then you look at certificates of value, quote, may or may not be 1 year. So I think part of what we can do as a business community is frankly do a better job of, and we have great relationships, I think, through with the state board and with the governor's office. You know, we can help inform this discussion so that if we're talking about a 60% goal, maybe we can be, you know, a little more clear about what that exactly is defined as. And I don't know that that's a static, I mean, this may be an overstatement, but I don't know that that's a static goal. In other words, I think there's some nuances that we could probably bring to this picture that maybe support exactly what you're saying. And as Rod said, we've had a lot of discussions about that, and hopefully this survey and other things can help support some of the points you're making.
Well, all I'd like to do is to offer up to share the information with the CEOs and the HR, which are the two people that we have talked to just give us a head count. Some of these companies have 300 to 400 employees, and say how many of those are at entry level are required to have any post-education, not experience, workforce trained experience, which most people consider that as good as an education. If they've been welding for X number of years, have been a diesel mechanic, it isn't necessarily the certificate, it's the skill and the experience. But our experience was with these 10 companies that I told you about, uncensored, how many of these, and they came back to us, and it was less than 10%. So this gap between what you're saying, that they're saying that they need is 10% of these people to have this level of education, and what you're saying that we are at today, that's a long ways off the target of 60%. And I think that it's important for us to be able to go get uncensored. We hire people every single day that have bachelor's and master's degree at entry-level jobs because they can't get a job within the educational field. Are they worthwhile? You bet they are. Do we appreciate the education there is? But we're looking for somebody with a specific skill, and if they don't have that, they're back at an entry level, and you wouldn't count that as a requirement for that specific skill set to have a master's degree because that they're working in there in an unskilled job.
Well, is that, if that's available, I don't think we've seen that, have we?
No.
Your particular, is that available?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Why don't you join the IBE, and then you can make sure we get that information directly?
One of the things is, Kathy touched on this, is our survey, these are partial, we consider these partial results. We are still in the process of connecting with business leaders, so we would love to know those 10 CEOs so we can get their data included in our survey. And perhaps they've filled out the survey and perhaps they haven't, but we'd love to know who they are so that we can follow up with them, because their information is very important to us. So,
Yeah, let me give another trustee a chance for a question here.
Thank you. Well, Ron wears two hats. One is a business owner and one is a trustee. And so his perspective of a business owner it's great to have. And as trustees, though, I think a lot of our concern is we have so many students that do have that less than a year certificate that we need to count as success. They deserve to be counted as success. So whatever work you can do in that area so that they're in that 60% range when we finally get there, they deserve it. They've worked hard and they're currently working somewhere. My other question is, what exactly is your footprint here in North Idaho? Is it, I just found out Judy's the regional director. That's wonderful. And then you really focus on business. I work for the government, and government deals with the same issues, lack of skills. I interview lots of people, lack of skills. So how can government have a voice in working with you?
Okay, well, and really two questions. I think one, the footprint is one part of the reason we're up here is to broaden that footprint. And frankly, we need to do a lot better job of the footprint here. We're meeting tomorrow morning with some of the business leadership here in Coeur d'Alene, and then a little later in Sandpoint. So,
You're coming back again, some of the.
and we're going to spend a lot more time around the state, just to be sure we do have that footprint. And I think that, the platform is there in terms of this organization, and now we're trying to broaden that membership base. And I think, we've got a pretty strong core of people that have been working on this, but we just need to broaden the geographic reach, and that's part of why we're here, and we'll continue to be here. And I wasn't facetious when I said, we'd love to have, people like Ron and, others who are interested in this arena in the passionate way that you are, so that we are getting the right information and we are getting that through the system to the public, to the policymakers. On the second question, on the government or the public sector, we do have what we call associate member or affiliate members. And so think like IACI, we have associations in the public sector that are in that particular part. And we'd love to have that kind of connectivity, because it's not like those are foreign concerns. Yeah, and we have healthcare. They're actually regular voting members, but chambers of commerce, IACI, some of the public policy type officials would be the affiliate members. So if there's interest in one way or another, we'd love to get that connection going, because you're right. I mean, it's a lot of the same issues, and it's a big, huge employer.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Judy?
Just a point of clarification, I don't know if we can get it on the screen, but the address for the survey site, so folks that are hearing about it, because we're televised as well, could know where that survey site is, and the website address for IBE would be helpful. Is that?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Well, we could get the survey to anyone, to Mr. Nielsen, Judy, make sure you get a copy of that link so that you can link.
And I suspect we could get it on our college website once we got it to you. Thank you, Mark.
And that website again was?
It's Idaho, it's BE.org.
So www.idaho.org. Idaho. We're just.
Survey website as well?
That's what, but we don't have it on the screen. Okay.
We have it on, I think,
The other power.
yeah, there's another PowerPoint.
We're presenting it tomorrow to this business group.
Why don't we could get that information to Mark and
Yeah.
do it that way, but Diana, why don't you just come up, just so we do get it to the public real quick, and just give us what those websites are. And we'll at least get that in the.
Yep.
While we're doing that too, Christie, back to your question, one of the things we found when we looked around the country at which of these business organizations were most effective, one of the things we found was that the voting, ideally, if you're gonna have the biggest impact, that the voting members, if they're the senior executives of for-profit corporations, that resonates with the policymakers at a higher level sometimes. So we need that input from other sectors, so that's why we have the affiliate members.
Sure.
So I think there's a way to get the dots connected there.
Great.
There was a logic to the way we kind of structured the membership at the beginning.
Thank you. Can we get that on there?
Mr. Chairman, maybe while she's looking that up, I could ask her a
Sure,
question.
go ahead.
On several occasions, you refer to the President's Council, President's Cabinet. Remind me who comprises that? That has kind of charged you with this and given you some
On the
direction?
survey?
Yes.
What's the President's Council?
Leaders of all the institutions.
It's the state.
4-year, 2-year?
Everybody. I think Bert Glandon's actually the chair of it right now.
Who's College of Western Idaho.
College of Western Idaho. And one of the early initiatives of the IBE was that whole idea, and that's why I said at the beginning, kind of in the foundational ideas of this organization, was the importance of going on and that access question. And so a lot of us, I was a co-chair with Gary Michael and one other person on the College of Western Idaho's initiative. And this organization is hugely supportive of community colleges. So anything we can start thinking about doing collectively, and again, that's another reason to get this footprint broadened, we're very open to doing. And that was a fundamental idea that we were successful at being part of in the Treasure Valley, and we're very open to any thoughts or ideas. And to your points, you know, if we can be part of getting the best set of information, the best set of facts that are accurate around some of these big issues, that's, you know, part of the job of this organization.
I think
Can I
that,
get you to move back over to the microphone so
sorry.
we can pick that up on the tape?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that you said is you've had some conversations with Mr. Sayer, our Director of Commerce. He is very engaged with the business community here. He knows what the needs and wants. He knows what jobs go unfilled. He knows where the future jobs are based on our current demands and what our future demands are. And I think that he would be somebody that would help you give uncensored. A lot of times we go to businesses and we tell them what they want, and the businesses always say, no, that's not what we want. And then we say, yes, that is, because that's the trend we're going to. And we always say, okay, great, you produce what you want, we're gonna hire what we want. And I think Jeff understands that pretty well. He sees this, and I think he's got the governor's ear. I think he's got all the economic development groups here's ear, and I think he's sharing that with them. So I think it's a great start if you spend some time with Mr.
Well,
Sayer.
Jeff and I have already met, and he and I have agreed that we're going to collaborate on this, and we're going to make a joint presentation to the President's Council. He's doing a economic development survey this summer. We're doing this survey. And we're going to go jointly to the university, college presidents, and present our information to them. We're doing that together. So we're already collaborating. We've already decided to do that. So he's a great, you know, he's represented, he helped explain to me what you're saying and what his brother says, and and I think that informed our discussion about this certificate less than a year. So we've already started collaborating with Jeff on this.
Thank you.
Did you have the information that you wanted to convey on the website and that sort of thing? Can we read it?
No. The study, what's the study website?
I don't have glasses.
Okay, why don't we just read it off?
We may have to read it. I don't think we can
It's
see it.
http://www.surveymonkey.com/s/IBE survey.
When you said the word monkey, Mr. Browning raised his hand and says, I know that website. So
Thank you.
Let's do that.
Were there any other questions?
Just to highlight also the booklet that you all did, do you have any more of these, the education field guide, Education Idaho?
I'll leave some available on the website.
There again, they can be available through the college, that'll help out. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, if the banana fits.
And before you sit down, I do have a question, and maybe it's by way of a comment partially too, but when we were made aware of the fact that Idaho was adopting the 60% solution, one of the questions I think that a lot of the people in education asked, so what do you want people educated in? I mean, if it's going to be 10 years down the road, and you want us to educate people in workforce-ready positions, who's going to tell us what those positions are and what's necessary to train them for those positions? And that is really a critical thing for education to know so that we can plan ahead. Right now, we're engaged in a fairly significant study about planning for professional technical facilities here because we've got a backlog of certain skill-developed professional technical programs. Looking down the road 10 years from now, if we want to try and plan to meet the needs of industry, it's something that you can't necessarily do in a short period of time. You need advanced planning. So what you're doing, your survey and everything, really ties into, quite frankly, a lot of the needs that we have, and I applaud that. And I guess the more detailed that you can get rather than general, it's going to meet the needs of education. Can you comment a little bit about how you see that developing?
We have much more specific information, but it's still preliminary. And so that's the reason you have general information tonight. But we have asked the question about what occupations are you going to need, and not only what occupations are you going to need, but understanding that a lot of what people need are the 21st century skills. So we've asked that too, very specifically. on which ones do they think are most important. And that's just the piece of what I showed you tonight about the teamwork. But we took the 21st century skills, asked that question in lots of different ways, and also about occupations. But I want to say one more thing too, and I think it's very, and maybe it's just in my mind, maybe because I'm straddling both education and business, but one of the things that seems to me to be kind of a hook here that we're talking about, especially from you, was the definition of certificate. And what I found over the years in my work, which has been 35 years of doing this back and forth between education and business, is the difference in language and definitions. And you know, when I think the survey went out about certificates, I'm not sure that the businesses answered it having anything in mind about the fact that the state board is saying it has to be a year. So I wanted to say that because I think it's an apple and an orange, and I think in the businesses' minds, they want a certificate. But what it takes to get a certificate in nursing and what it takes to get one in welding or in A+ computer, it's totally different. And I think they look at it with their lens. But the community colleges and the technical skills centers that we have here, kind of also, because I do a lot of work in Washington State, there's so many different levels of certificate, and I'm not sure that's been very well defined. So I think a really big role that IBE could take would be to say, look, if you're going to say 60% and says a certificate, what does that mean? Because I'm not sure that's how they answered this. I think they did it with their lens.
One of the things that I love what you said is that we have to clarify definitions, and we've had a couple of conversations about it. We're the only state that I know of in the United States that still calls it professional technical education, which is misleading. It's a different term. Everybody else uses career and technical education, which is a little bit more general, saying, well, they're giving me a career, they're giving me some technical help, and it's not to...
Do you want to know the history on that?
No. So,
well, but just one of the reasons I wanted to tell you, because I was involved in the very beginning of that when they started building the technical centers, is that they really don't want to be seen as vocational. And so what they tried to do was say professional, technical, not vocational, because so many people, they were afraid that so many people put a bad spin on vocational. And so they took that name instead because they thought that was the direction the country is going, but it didn't go that way. It went more to career.
sometimes it's the education that doesn't like the word vocational
I
training.
know.
Right.
But career and technical education, I think, is a uniform language that says it satisfies both sides of this, and in an effort for us to be more uniform, we
I
should
agree
be
with
talking
you.
about that.
If there's one other comment that I'd like to address anyway, in terms of maybe some value that you would have for us in this whole idea of what is their certificate, what is completion, what is graduation, because you've already discussed the fact that industry may see a certificate or some kind of evidence of success in one way, and the State Board of Education sees it another. Unfortunately, those two definitions have to come together.
I know.
And they have to come together fairly quickly, I think, because what happens, and I'm fearful that what will happen in this state is that the definition used by the State Board of Education will determine funding. And it will become the definition used by legislators in terms of how are we going to fund a particular program because they have the success rate. And they've defined it, and it's defined as some kind of associate's degree or some kind of a one-year certificate, when indeed success is something entirely different. And we've asked them, quite frankly, to look at community colleges differently than they might a four-year institution or even a K-12 institution, because we serve a broad range of individuals through a broad range of career needs, and they come in and out of the system as they're needed. And we're afraid that we're going to get trapped, quite frankly, in a definitional dispute at some point in time, and it will affect the funding that we get. So any assistance that you can give us in passing that message on to the State Board of Education, community colleges need to be treated differently, definitionally, when it comes to success.
Community colleges are pretty new in Idaho compared to other states. And I think if you think about that, you know, they've been in Michigan since the 1800s. So if you think about some of these things, one of the things that we need to do is make community colleges a lot more clearer, period, to the state, because that's really where the students are going. I love community colleges, so I have a bias, but I really do think that's part of the issue, and that's where the certificate gets caught up in there, because that's where they come from so many times.
Let us do this. I think to the points we're hearing, let us kind of get a little bit of feedback ourselves from, I mean, with Mike Rushmark, you know, I would think Mike,
He'd
would get it. So let us do a little kind of spade work on this and maybe come back to you with some feedback as to what we hear. And it ties into the discussions we're going to be having on the survey anyway. So let us do a little work on that, and then we can come back with maybe a little feedback through Judy and otherwise.
And that was really my wrap-up question, was one of, when do you predict you'll have some more knowledge and survey completion and some more things to come back to both the state board and us with? What are you learning?
So we are going to keep the survey open through probably mid-August, because that's when we're going to finish our meetings. We've got 8 or 9 meetings around the state. Our first one is tomorrow here in Coeur d'Alene. We're still seeking feedback from business leaders, so we really would like the feedback of those 10 business leaders. So we'll have our results by mid-August. We will be writing our report, then we will be sending that report out to all the business leaders who participated. We're going to give it to the media. Just yesterday, I talked to President Burnett from the University of Idaho, and I said that sometime right after Labor Day, we would like to come back, Jeff Sayer, and meet with the President's Council so we can go through the survey with them. So by early September, we should be able to give everybody a copy of what the survey says, and we'll start those one-on-one meetings with, we'd be glad to come back up here and meet with you all and have the complete survey at that point.
Just a closing comment is my experience has been with a CEO of a company that has 300, 400, 500 people. They really don't read your electronic email that says, will you take the time to fill out the survey? They're going through 200 emails a day. My suggestion is that you call the person, and I'm more than willing to share with you a personal contact, and then you ask them some very simple questions. Not, you know, measure from 1 to 10 what you think the importance is of having, you know, this, and this, and they're just going to say, you got to be kidding me. If you're asking me this question, you don't know the answer, or should at least know the answer. So if you can get it down to the top 8 questions, make it very simple. How many jobs do you see today that require a 1-year certificate, a 2-year associate's degree, and then spell those jobs out for, and what do you see that changing in the next 10 years? And I think that you will be surprised that listening from them what they feel it is in their HR department, because those are the two that make the hiring. So.
Well, we'll follow up. We'll get those names. We'll call them personally and ask them to.
And I would be glad to interview them personally and just take their information.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe, Chairman, I mean, just to wrap this up, because I know we got to get out of here, but I guess just to sort of summarize what I think we're hearing, just to make sure we heard it right, at least there's 3 things we could follow up on here. One is we're going to get the survey results back to you when they're completed. Happy to come up and go over those. Number 2, in the meantime, this whole definitional question of certificate, we can go to work on that, I think, with the state board and with Roger Brown and the governor's office, at least begin to get some discussion of that going and see what we hear, and then get back maybe through Judy to you all, and we can even, and Mark, you know, as we get that feedback, and then see if we can't impact that particular question, because it's one we're hearing, not just here. And then thirdly, we'll follow up on that offer on the CEOs, because it wouldn't just be up here, but I think that's probably a good idea.
Mr. Lund, Mark, can you get on the college website, I'm sure, the survey site, so people who hear this on television and wanted to complete a survey have a way to get to the survey, an address for it? I guess it's part of the board meeting, or running under the board meeting in minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming up and sharing that with us, and we look forward to being able to share information with you in the future and hear what your study reveals, and hopefully move forward with success and getting folks educated in this state the way we think they should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, our next agenda item, we have no old business, so we're going to move on to the new business, and the first one is an action item on a lease agreement for the small engine repair facility. Mark Lyons.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this tab item is an action item. It is for approval of the small engine repair facility lease. This is a property that has been negotiated by the Office for Resource Management. It has been reviewed by my office, and we are using a lease form that we are familiar with, that we have used before with other businesses. This is a 3-year lease. I can tell you candidly, I was not involved in the details of the lease, and so I may have to defer to Vice President Dorn on this, but the action that is requested is for the board to approve by motion the lease as negotiated, and to approve, and that would be included in the budget that includes the funding for this lease. So if there are any questions, we may have to defer.
Yeah. Anybody, do I hear a motion with regard to the lease so that we can discuss it?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the Board of Trustees approve the proposed small engine repair lease with Kyle Helmut and authorize the board chair to execute, along with the Vice President for Resource Management, this lease agreement.
We have a second.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Call for the vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, that passes.
I have the original lease here, so at the end of the meeting, Mr. Chair, I'll ask you to
I do
sign
want to
it.
make a comment. That refers, quite frankly, to the Howard Addition and Howard Avenue, and it has nothing to do with me. I don't want somebody looking at that thinking there's a conflict of interest in some way here.
But you don't mind if we audit that, do you?
No, I don't. No. Yeah. All right, our second item is the presidential contract, and the board's had an opportunity to review that. Do I have any, a motion with regard to the president's contract?
I move that the board accept the employment agreement between Mr. Dunlap and the college, and that the board chair be authorized to execute this contract for Mr. Dunlap on behalf of the Board of Trustees.
Meyer seconds the motion.
All right, any discussion? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, I would just, I'm sorry Joe's not here tonight. This is really kind of a great thing to do with him. I think we've had a wonderful year with President Dunlap, and I'm excited for where we're going in the future, and I'd like to congratulate him on a job well done.
Judy?
I was also just going to comment that my understanding is the renewal of the contract is at the same salary as last year,
Correct.
and it was at his request that there be no increase for him
Right.
since he understood the financial crunch. And we thank him for that as well.
I'd also like to echo what Judy and Chrissy says, as we believe Mr. Dunlap has done an incredible job of bringing some team spirit to this institution, holding our board together in a very professional way. And as we did his evaluation, which was an hour-and-a-half ordeal, going through every aspect.
Not ordeal.
Ordeal, well. Well, yeah, it was quite a wonderful exercise.
That's right, good.
But it was amazing all 5 people come together with the same consensus. He's doing an incredible job for the short period of time he's been here. I think he's a very dynamic person, and there were some areas that the board felt that he can work on. But the last thing you want to do is go the first year, you got an A+, and then there's nothing else to work for. So kudos to Mr. Dunlap for the job he's done so far.
Any other comments? I think for the record, also, we just ought to state that this is essentially a renewal of the contract that we entered into last year, with the exception that there was a clause in there that required that he relocate from Spokane area into the Coeur d'Alene area within a year. That's been accomplished. He did that actually within a matter of weeks or months. And the second provision that was modified was that there was a moving expense, but there was a one-time expense, and that has not been included in this year's contract. Other than that, it's just a repeat of last year's contract with no increases. So with that discussion, is there any other comments that need to be made? Otherwise, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. The third item, action item, let me go back, actually to tab item number 2. Because it's an action item and it's a first reading, we can waive the first reading on the, and actually make this the second reading, so that it immediately goes into effect. We don't have to do it a month from now, 2 months from now.
So do we just make a motion that we,
Just make a motion that we waive the,
I make a motion that we waive the second reading and approve the contract as already approved.
second?
Meyer seconds.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the same with regard to the lease agreement, which is tab 1. Do I have a,
I make a motion that we waive the second reading and move forward with the lease agreement. It's already been approved.
right, any discussion, or a second?
Meyer
All
second.
right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Passes unanimously. Now on to tab 3.
Okay.
Financing agreement with the city of Coeur d'Alene for the flood dike certification project. And that was discussed in our last meeting. You have in your packet the actual financing agreement with the city of Coeur d'Alene for the flood dike certification, which basically involves us paying approximately half of the fee to do the study in advance of any remedial measures. Are there any motions with regard to tab 3?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may, an additional comment with what you said, though, to clarify for anybody that's watching, yes, we are paying half, but we did cap it at 250,000, correct?
It's actually an odd number. It's in the motion, or it's in the
I see that's the
document, rather.
248.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, it is capped at that. Now, is there a motion with regard to signing that agreement?
Is that my cue? Oops,
Could be.
oops. Okay, thank you. I move that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed flood works certification agreement with the City of Coeur d'Alene and authorize the Board Chair to execute, along with the Vice President for Resource Management, this agreement.
Is there a second?
Q.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'm more than happy to second it, but I got a question, so go ahead, I second it.
All right.
Then we can discuss, yeah.
Any discussion? Discussion?
Yeah, I just would like to understand again the process. Are you up to speed on this, Mark?
Yes, sir.
I assume that's why you're standing there, right?
Yes, sir.
You didn't say anything up till this point, so I figured
No,
at some
sir.
point that somebody better ask you a question, because you're not, you're gonna look really funny up there. Is this, we've done some feasibility study on this, is this a realistic, it's just hard, I think we went through this with Ron Doran, but this is just such a huge number, and it seems like that it's not really as tangible, and it's not a contracted amount. So when you're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers and the certification and FEMA and all that type of stuff, if we had some outside counsel look at this and say, this is a realistic number, and we're not gonna get it any cheaper, and there's no other way around this, and we're happy that the city's participating in it, I mean, have you gone through this?
Mr. Chair and Trustee Nielsen, yes, the answer to your questions are yes, and it is a large number. And I can tell you from our conversations and with Ron and I working with the city, they're not happy about the number either, and really neither is the consultant, but that is the cost of the work that's been done, but it is what that type of work commands in terms of work. It's specialized work. It involves things that are way beyond a lot of my understanding in terms of what they do. But I want to be clear, it is for the feasibility study of what will need to be done. This does not cover the cost of the actual work to fix the dike. This is just for the study. How that will be done and financed will be the subject of great discussion going forward. This is just for the plan on what will have to be done.
Any other questions?
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, did our attorney have a chance to look at it, Mr. Lyon?
Yes, the contract has been reviewed for form, and we have proposed some changes, and as has the Office for Resource Management, and it's gone back and forth with the city a couple of times, mostly just making sure that we do have a cap in place, and that it's not an open-ended obligation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I got a question I almost don't want to ask, but I'm gonna. The agreement calls for 2 payments. One fairly quickly in July.
July, and one after September.
Yeah. Is there, and I don't think there was any money budgeted for that, was there?
No,
All right, where's the money going to come from?
out of the one-time, right now, it have to come out of the one-time money. The 1.8 million one-time money we got from the state 2 years ago, we have about 532,000, 523,000 of that left. It would have to come out of there, pending what happens with the enrollment law.
And I guess I'm wondering, do you require, because I don't remember, quite frankly, how that money was set out of the budget. Are you going to require some modification to the budget by the board in order to be able to pay it?
I don't think, well, that's option, but I don't think you have this 532 sits fund balance right now, I believe. And so if it sits in the fund balance, the answer would be yes, we'd have to come back for modification of the budget to pay that out of the fund balance. That would increase the expenditure side of our budget.
Okay. And when are we going to know that?
I'd have to give that to you at the August meeting.
Okay. Oh, if you could tell us as quickly as possible, we may have to call a special meeting. If the first payment's due in July, we're not going to have another meeting until August, and we have to have some board approval of an amendment of the budget in order to pay it, then we'll have to call a special meeting for it. So maybe as quickly as you can determine that, that'd be helpful.
I have 2 ways to go. To avoid a special meeting, I could pay it out of contingency money that's in the budget right now. But I think ultimately, looking at the fall enrollment right now, we're going to have to come back and ask for an adjustment in the budget. But we could have that discussion at some time between now, well, in the next, I guess, next couple of weeks, have that discussion, if that's a logical way for me to go, or whether I should let you know so we have a special meeting to do it now. So I've got 2 ways to do it. I can cover it out of currently budgeted money right now, the first payment, and come back in August to ask for
Forgiveness.
approval. Well, no, because that's already budgeted. But I have contingency money budgeted in the plant fund that I could pay it out of now that you have already improved without increasing the budgeted expenditures. That probably is the easiest way to go. But we're probably going to have to open the budget in the fall anyway when we see what enrollment's like.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that if we approve this agreement, that if you go ahead and pay it, that you're paying it with funds that have been approved by the board in terms of.
At $425,000 in the planned fund is a contingency fund right now that you approved as a board. That's where I'll take it out of, so we don't have to have a special meeting to deal with it.
You could always put it on your Cardinal card and get miles, and then you get 2 free round trips anywhere you travel in the U.S.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Ron, that 1.8 million, as you know, the board poured through that in great detail, and it was all assigned to specific projects. And so, explain, please,
Which one
why, which projects are not being funded and how those projects went away.
When we looked at it, that list, in developing this budget, we went back to the, quote, stakeholders that had asked for that money, and either they did not spend all the amount that they'd requested, or those projects weren't a priority to be done. They didn't need to be done. So we swept that money back into a central fund. when we put this budget together.
Now, my recollection at the time, the board said, we're going to put 300,000 of that into the capital improvement fund, so really, we could have put 800,000 into the capital improvement fund, because those projects, if they aren't necessary now, why were they necessary then? Not vilifying you, I'm just really curious.
Different folks around the table that thought they were necessary, and one of the issues is, you talked to the current president, we went through that in a hurry to try to allocate that money so that we could spend it, and obviously, on second hindsight, not all of it was necessary.
Okay.
So the 300 does, and wonder, that money right now, I believe, sits in the capital improvement fund. I think the whole 523 is in there right now.
Okay.
But when I'm looking at enrollment issues relative to the budget, I would probably come back and ask if we needed it. That's money that wasn't part of the foregone tax issue. Could I get it back if I needed it? Yeah.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind explaining to our newest board members how we acquired the 1.8.
That was a one-time allocation from the state of Idaho, terminology escapes me, in the budgeting process to catch up for unfunded enrollment increases over the past X number of years, and I don't remember how many years, but that was in their formula, when you submit the budget to the state, there's a section in there that is
EWA.
EWA.
Enrollment workload adjustment.
Enrollment workload adjustment, and that hadn't been funded basically since the state started having fiscal problems, and the 1.8 million was to catch up on the funding that had been lacking for our enrollment workload adjustment, and that's based on enrollments. So that's how we got the money. And it was a one-time shot of money right at the end of fiscal year 12, right at the very end of it. And it did wind up, I think it did wind up going in our base, but that was a one-time allocation, or at least an end-of-the-year allocation for us, and that's how we chose to deal with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call for a vote. All in favor of the motion to authorize the chair and the vice president of resources to sign the agreement? In favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Holding their noses.
Okay. All right, it passes. Thank you. The next is an information item. Gary Stark on community garden location update. I think there was an inquiry, Gary, and you have been kind enough to gather some information for us.
Yes, I have. There you go. I'll use the cdaid.org site to show this, but right where lot 16 is, where it has the little number 830, I don't know if you guys can see my little mouse up there, but that is 1 acre of land that is set aside for the community garden. It's actually, I don't want to be calling it a community garden, it's called the Gathering Garden, and it's a community-supported agriculture is what they like to call it. So, and I've heard some concerns about the community garden area, and one thing is the water runoff. I've heard some questions on that possibility of, if now that they have the garden there, will the runoff from the old log yard interfere with that. Well, we've had a little bit of rain this last week, and I drove by there every day making sure to see what was going on there. And there are 4 dry wells in that place that are not hooked up to the stormwater. I talked to Kim Harrington from the city of Coeur d'Alene, and she says there's nothing tied in with that site to the stormwater. It's just 4 dry wells. 2 of them are capped with a concrete lid. 2 of them have the open lid to let water in, and the other 2 are like extra storage for the water. The water never did get up to those lids, to the dry wells this past rainfall. I think the only time we have that issue is when the snow is melting off the parking lot, and then it's also raining. Then it would get up to the dry wells, but it won't interfere their work. What they're actually doing is setting up they're doing like a water conservation thing with the University of Idaho, and the guy's name is Jim, I don't know if it's Ekins or Ekins, but this young gal, Maria Garcia, she's an intern for Julie Van Middlesworth here at the college, and they're doing this study and putting up this water conservation type setup. They actually saw a little bit of oil in it, and they weren't sure if that was in there before from the previous thing, but they're trying to, do all these water tests and make sure that this is working. They're going to add a bunch of different bushes and grasses and different things. So it's coming along. The garden, they have, I don't know how many beds are there. There must be 8 beds that are above ground. They have a greenhouse over there. They have a tool shed that the K-Tech kids built. And all along the fence of the alley, they have all kinds of plants over there. I mean, the whole thing is 1 acre of land is going to be used, plus this water conservation type testing area. So I can entertain any questions you might have on it.
Any questions? Judy?
Thank you. And Gary, I was probably the one that asked about the swale ordinance, because somewhere codes are going to require some sort of runoff drainage spots. And this was originally a swale for the log
yard.
And since we've now turned some of that into parking lot, I just want to be sure that we've coordinated with the city and they don't come back to us later with we don't have enough swales and we have to build another one instead of using the one that's already there.
Well, our parking lot is a temporary parking lot right now, so I think if we ever did do anything there, we would have to come up to code for the updated codes right now. I actually talked to Kim about that today to verify that. So any type of new construction that we do in that lot, if we decide to put a event center or the student rec center or whatever, we would have to take the runoff somewhere. And
which we now have a swale to do.
We have a swale, but I don't think that swale would actually meet code, because all it is going to dry wells.
And that's my question, to be sure we be as proactive as we can in what we're doing. Looks like a great project. Question on orientation here. There's no labeling on the map for, I assume north is at the top.
Find your turnabout. I think.
And
that'll be your-
turnabout means that circle that we're seeing there?
The roundabout?
Well, we're reading it as turnabout, but yep, I'm assuming that's the case. So this bend matches that one? Thank you.
Yeah, I think where it humps
I figured this
there.
is north, yeah?
They can.
Shouldn't be. Northwest Boulevard goes that way.
I have a question for him, but.
Be good to have a,
North is that one.
yep, compass on it then. Okay. So the turnabout is the roundabout. Thank you.
Any other questions? Todd?
Gary, I have a question for you, but it's on an unrelated topic. We're working on the gangway down there. I guess did that require county approval, and is that going smoothly, and how's that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Tell me about that, my friend.
They will be, it does have to go through the county. We've done that. We also went through the Idaho Department of Lands for the permit once you get towards the water. The landing has been poured and the gangway is built They just sent me a picture of it today. They're gonna deliver it Friday and
Who built
install
that?
it. HD Marine, down in Harrison Dock Builders. And they will have it installed Saturday. It'll be completed.
Can you confirm what it is, where it is, what it is?
Oh, the gangway?
You got something that can shore, Gary? I mean, I can explain it, but it's on our beach.
This is an information item, basically. It's a gangway that's being built.
Well, one of the things we've always discussed is the issue of the city versus the county, and when they tried to do the handicap access. And so I was figuring this one had to be a little easier because it was just the county, but now I'm hearing you had another agency that you had to coordinate
Yeah,
with.
we did.
And you're going to go across the city to take your gangplank.
Yeah, here's the, coming off the bulkhead. This will actually extend up 30 feet, have a landing, go another 20 feet this way, have a landing, and then land in the middle of the bulkhead. And it'll be ADA accessible with a 1 to 12 slope.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
One last thing, Janet Torline is the gal that's running this garden, the Gathering Garden, and her number, because she wants people, if they want to go down there and help out, her phone number is 667-8550, and she said they have gloves, and they will let you use them to help pull weeds or whatever. They need all the help they can get, so.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary. Then there's an update on the Burlington Northern request for a lease. Mark?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the property that is now owned by the Burlington Northern that adjoins portions of North Idaho College property and is the subject of a negotiations between the BLM and the city of Coeur d'Alene. I've done a little bit of investigation. I'm going to defer to Vice President Browning here in a minute. But the application for lease was submitted by the city of Coeur d'Alene in January of this year. That application for a lease does acknowledge that the city of Coeur d'Alene is interested and is applying to lease the BLM property, which is the former railroad right-of-way property. It is proposed use is for public recreation. The application does contemplate that a detailed plan and schedule for development and a management plan will be completed, and it also contemplates that one of the specific concerns and uses of the land will be educational purposes for North Idaho College and other institutions of public learning. Now, there is a community master planning that is just beginning. It's my understanding that Doug Eastwood from the city of Coeur d'Alene is chairing that, and that there's a committee that Vice President Browning and I believe Gary Stark are also part of. I have not been to those meetings, so I would like to defer to Vice President Browning for further update.
Any questions on the report? Yes, Christie?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for bringing that up. And Mark, I was at a meeting with my day job and with our good neighbors, the Fort Ground Homeowners Association, and they were invited to take part of the planning. So the college was never mentioned during a presentation that was done by Doug Eastwood. I don't think that was intentional. I just didn't understand if we were invited. So we are to those meetings.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, there's been one meeting of this group, and it's primarily the Parks and Rec Commission in the city, and they invited representatives from here as well as LCSC and the University of Idaho. So Rocky Owens and myself attended, and there was an informal discussion as to what our master ideas and plans might be for that strip of property that's being discussed. And we talked about how we're working together to put our master capital plan together in terms of facilities and what could and couldn't be done. So we were there and been participating, and Doug's been very good about saying, okay, we're going to have you come back again in the future, and we'll continue to talk about this. There was a lot of discussion about restrictions about what could and could not take place with the property in question in terms of exchange, commercial exchange, for-profit type ventures, and that it must specifically, as Barrister Lyons said, must specifically be for an education or recreation purpose. So.
And before I forget, Mr. Chair, the Fort Grand Homeowners Association would love to, and they intend to invite President Dunlap to their next meeting, or a board member, or any of the cabinet. And I think that we absolutely need to make sure we go to those meetings and connect with our good neighbors.
Mark, it was my understanding in one of the preliminary discussions, and then when we met with the city council and the mayor, that one of the options that we had was to go to one of our elected federal representatives, one of our congressmen, senators, or reps, and that we could have them put a, I don't know what would be, a motion or something that they could have signed off that would remove those restrictions and limitations on the use of the property, and would actually could designate NIC as an owner of a portion of it to give us our contiguous property all the way to Northwest Boulevard, and give Coeur d'Alene, City of Coeur d'Alene their property, and actually do the demarcations as a part of that process, and then free us up under congressional record approval. My terminology's off here, but are we doing that? Have we chased after one of our representatives and asked them to sponsor that?
Mr. Chair and Trustee Banducci, yes. We've had discussions with the Washington delegation now. In my estimation, this is the most prudent move in the short term, is to get it through this process. The BLM is interested in getting the project done and getting the transfer to the city, and the city's interested in getting it done. Long term, yes, I think that's still a possibility, but there's a reason that the phrase "an act of Congress" has become a cliche to describe things that are incredibly difficult and nearly impossible to realize in one's lifetime, and that's what it literally would take. It would take an act of Congress to have that transfer take place. So in the interim, my recommendation is this is the best way to go, and I don't know if you want to weigh in any differently, but we have had, the last time I was in DC and talked with those folks, I told them that was our intention, that we'd like to do that. They recommended working through this on the short term, and that could be a longer term project.
If I may, Mark, pardon me, I'm going to be specific here for a moment. You're using the term "they" and our Washington delegation and our congressional masses. Do we have an individual belly button that will agree to champion this or take this forward, or do? I mean, this is the sort of thing that it should be a no-brainer for a bipartisan, approval. It could be tagged down to something that everybody's going to vote. But I mean, will anybody step up and actually be the guy on this? We've got 4 representatives, 2 senators, but 4 congressmen.
Mr. Chair and Trustee Banducci, I'm sure if we asked one of the 4, they certainly would. But I would also probably add that what makes sense in our estimation doesn't always sail through Congress. And right now, there is not a single bill that gets through without significant angst. And so if we try to go and attach this onto something now, the way things are tied up, we are going to wait and wait and wait before we can even have any use of the property. So I think in the short term, we're better off to do this and continue to work until we can find something
that's what I'm thinking,
that we can attach it to at the appropriate time. But we didn't meet with any opposition of any of either of the senators or the 2 representatives from Idaho that would have any opposition in helping to move this forward.
Any other questions? Mark, I appreciate the fact that you're attending these meetings for the development of the master plan. I got to tell you, I personally have a concern that I would like to see us follow through with, and that is that a lot of time, not a lot, in my experience, our dealings with the city has been, if we're in partnership in some way, they kind of take over, and then we hear about it after it's done, quite frankly. And that's kind of happened on this Dyke Trees thing. And it's happened in some other relationships that we had. There's nothing wrong with what they do. It's just we don't assert our position enough, I think, to stay informed. And to make sure that we get a position in this lease agreement with the BLM is critical. Because as I understand it from my talking to the BLM folks, that whatever's in that lease agreement is going to be the restriction that's going to be put on the use of that property. So if we want to have access and use of that property between Hubbard and River, then we ought to be talking about that, I think, in these communities, in these community, whatever. And it ought to be so that people in the community can also hear about that, and they can make comments on it, and so that it ends up in the record, and we make sure that our interest has been discussed in public meetings. And so I would appreciate it as you go to these meetings to make sure, even if it's redundant on each occasion, to indicate what our interest is, what the location of our interest is, and what we intend to use it for, because that will end up in the lease agreement, and we'll be bound by it. And quite frankly, I would like to make sure that we get a chance to see the application for the lease agreement and the master plan before it's submitted, so we have input on it. That's kind of been our agreement with the city, and I want to make sure that we follow through with it on our end in terms of making sure that we attend these meetings and that we make sure that we express what our interest is and the area of it.
Chairman Howard absolutely will do. And Vice President Dorn and I had an opportunity to chat with some folks the other day kind of related to this issue, and we made it very clear that anything that would ultimately be agreed to by and for the college would absolutely have to be cleared by the board and by president and by council, that everything will have to be reviewed and signed so that it meets the expectations from our side. So we want to make sure that the college's interests are protected as well. And I think you're right. I think the best way to do that is to be intimately engaged in the process.
I mean, the problem with this particular process is we are not involved in this process. This is between the BLM and the city. And to the extent that the city builds into this lease agreement our interest, then our interest will be preserved. But BLM is making this agreement with the city. I mean, we've already been through that. We tried to be part of that arrangement in terms of signing the lease. That's not going to happen. So we have to make sure that when the lease application goes in from the city, that we've got an opportunity to review it before it's submitted, and that our interests are adequately described in there. Now, I mean, work with Mark Lyons on that, because he's been working with Mike Gridley on the same thing. But I just think that it's not the kind of thing that we can just sit back and wait for it to happen. We've got to be engaged in it to make sure our interests are protected.
I agree fully.
If I could add something.
Please.
As the schedule for development, the plan for scheduled development, and the application that has been filed does contemplate a management plan that will be put together regarding the use of the property. We should see that and review that, because I think the parties contemplate, they do, and that those have been discussions. The NNIC will be part of that, but I think I agree that I have not been part of these meetings, but I think it's important that we look at the written language of the plan and that we're able to comment on it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And I completely agree with that. I'm glad that's happening, but I think that it's important for the college to remember that the city and the college have shared goals with the education corridor, and that they have the same idea we do about what to do with that property.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you for the report. The last formal report would be the board chair's report. The president is not here tonight. And really what I put on the agenda was professional technical education facilities, what's next? And it really is a question I want to put to the entire board. We've gone through our public hearings. We had, I think, a very informative workshop on methodology for financing the professional technical facilities and presentations about the different opportunities there are there. At one of these meetings in the very near future, we're going to have an agenda and maybe even a special meeting to address a motion on what we're going to do with regard to the professional technical. And I want to make sure that before we get to the point of making a decision about what we're going to do, how we're going to finance it, and where it's going to be, that this board has had an opportunity to gather all the information that they feel is appropriate for that decision-making process. And now, you know, we've had the meetings that we've had thus far, but there may be other things. I have proposed for our August meeting that there will be a presentation on from an economist to tell us about the trends in the Kootenai County area for employment and that sort of thing over the next 5 or 6 years, so that we have some kind of an idea about Kootenai County specific data on at least economic trends, if to the extent that may be helpful. But if anybody on the board feels that there's other pieces of information that we should be looking at, I'd like to know about that. I mean, we need to get that together so we can get this decision set forth. Ron?
Mr. Chairman, I would really like to have a chance just to sit down and do a recap. I was not here during the financial discussions and our funding options, so I think it would be a really good idea for us to get together one more time and go through that. But also, we had 3 public input sessions, and I think that we need to do is to meet together as a board and wrap all 3 of these together and come up with a clear understanding, what do we hear? And those are the 2 things I think that we need to start with. Location is important, but I think that if we don't have a clear understanding of where our financing is going to come from, I think it's we need to be able to get our arms around that first. So I'd like to have a wrap-up session on the financing options, a wrap-up session on our public input portion, and then as a board, have some discussions about the last thing, which seems to be a sensitive subject, which is the location of where this is going to go. So,
Any other comments? Judy?
It's my understanding that part of our ongoing information gathering will be, in fact, a tour of a campus in Tri-Cities that has done a professional technical building. That's, this one is on campus, right?
Yes.
And the board members are going to go do that as another part of our,
July 11th, I think is the date.
and is all the board able to go?
I don't know if Ron's going.
I'm not planning on going. I've been at enough of the sites before. I'm not sure that we're going to see anything that's going to change. It's not going to change any of our financing options. It's probably not going to change there. It's something that this RGU suggested we go see, because this was a trophy that they built, and we've seen a lot of professional technical, so I don't see no value in that to go down there and to see, so I'm not going to go.
My request when we go then would be to hear from, and I don't know if there'll be students on campus, but part of what I want to learn about is what worked right, what works right, what doesn't work like they hoped it would, some evaluation, because isn't it a relatively new facility in the last?
New, and we do have somebody from the campus, Vice President of Instruction, who is going to be with us to answer questions and show us around.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other comments? And I appreciate the fact that we should do a workshop to sort of summarize and get back these things freshly in front of us. I guess my question, though, is more fundamental than that, and that is, are there any components that we need to look at, like we looked at financing, and we looked at public opinion, and we looked at, the RGU study, and we looked at some other things as components. Are there any other components that we should look at in order to sort of satisfy ourselves that we've gotten the basic information now to make a workshop of some benefit? If there's no other suggestions, we'll move forward with what we got.
Well, I think that there's been a conflict of information that is garnered from the RGO report, as I pointed out earlier into it, was we were hoping would be a foundation that we could go from. The RGO report probably created more questions and more of a conflict between what the professional technical personnel here with the public saying and whatever. So I'd really like to have a discussion about cost per square footage, because there is a difference between, according to the RGU report, of what they could build the cost of square footage at the other. There's a total of 5 separate locations, 3 of them being on the current education corridor. There is one of them that's that will require some significant lease commitment and upgrade there, and what's going on at K-Tech. So I think that we need to be able to look at that number, because as we look at how much money we're going to be able to get, we're going to be real quickly, we got to know how much how many square footage we're gonna buy and what the difference is. So I'd love to be able to sit down and take every facet, which is the location, the cost per square footage, and take some of the emotional away from that, just purely from an economic, what makes the most sense for our students in our community, and then we'll discuss the emotional side of it, which is that we're gonna take away these kids' chance to be able to experience a college experience. We can get more students there, so I'd like to go through that process one time and come to some understanding between our board of what we think needs to be done next, so.
Judy, did you have a comment? Okay.
I do,
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair.
Christie.
Some of that information was actually given to us, Ron, I'm sorry you missed that workshop, but we did get that breakdown on square footage, and that's when the dollar amount was so huge. And we looked at the funding options, and we didn't see any options really that were workable. And so we do have that. Have Ron and, Rob, well, you're the only one who missed it. Have you been given a packet?
Holly Troxel was there.
I'm not sure
Let's
which.
make sure he gets that.
Packet you're referring to.
We videotaped it for you, you'll have to see the.
Okay, so the answer, it looks like the answer is no, I haven't seen it yet,
Well,
so.
there was something that Jacqueline provided.
Yeah, that goes with the video.
Yeah.
Oh, is it all packaged together? Good.
Yeah, I think Shannon's got that. Go ahead. Todd, did you have a question or comment?
I do. This is really to the other four of you, trustees. One of the things we've talked about, and Ron kind of alluded to one aspect, we're kind of hung up on the location, and sometimes that feels a little bit of the cart before the horse, because we're also not sure about our funding. We've got to have the money before we can select a location. But I guess one of my concerns, and maybe you guys have a better handle on this than I do, but I'm still struggling to fully understand if we've decided even what our building's going to look like and what we're going to start with and how we're going to incrementally build it out. I'm not sure that we're absolutely got our arms around how much space we need for each of these different programs, and how we're going to structure that and prioritize that as we start with a structure of some magnitude and incrementally build it out, or if we've decided we're going to go for that. We were given 3 different bond options, from the general obligation through the lease option to the student fee. So we've got the 3 different funding methods if we want to go publicly and do the bond levy, public financing. Of course, the general obligation requiring a 2/3 vote, which once we make the selection, we're going to tick off 2 different locations. Either 2 cities are going to be mad at us and everybody on campus will be happy, or vice versa. So countywide vote may be harder to pull off at that moment. So, do you guys feel comfortable that we actually have the design and structure of this building, that we're comfortable with what that looks like, so we can put a kind of a price tag on that, so then we could say, here's our financing options, and then based on that, and then looking at it, as Ron indicated, from a cost per square foot, and you're looking at it in a very utilitarian manner, what's the most efficient way to do it, regardless of how far we drive from here to there or where. I don't know how we do that right now. After all this work we've done and all the input, it seems like all we thought about was where we're putting it, but we've had a much smaller amount of input on what the facility looks like and how we're going to fund it. And so we do need a workshop. Absolutely, yes, sir, I believe we do. And I think we've got to step back a moment as a fivesome here and look hard at the information that we've been provided. And Ron, I don't want to disagree with you. I think there's a lot of holes in the RGU report. I think there's some information we can glean from that and some things that we can use from that as a foundation to build on with other input that we've gotten from folks. But one of the things I mentioned to Ken, we went out and looked at the Jacqueline facility and got a wonderful tour and from Bruce Sear, appreciated his time. And I got there and I'm looking at that thing, and I've seen it from the freeway, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is humongous. But to be honest with you, to take that building and walk through it and around, and we drove around, and it's a beautiful piece of property. I saw some spots on the river, my fly rod. I tell you, if we owned that property, I'd be on the river. But what do I do with that building, and how much is it going to actually cost? I have no idea what it's going to cost me to modify that and make it really work. And do the welding guys, can they use that, and OPRV, or the, or whoever, diesel mechanics, I can't even get my arms around it to really understand if the Jacqueline proposal that pays me out for 10 years with my balloon payment, that, yeah, I can afford it, and I'm looking at that big industrial building, and I've heard everybody tell me, man, that building's old, there's no way, it's incompatible, to, wow, that's a great way to do it, and you can have it financed, you don't have to go to the bond. But I haven't really seen, other than RGU at the 11th hour, or almost the 12th hour, kind of include it into their report to kind of sort of address it. And then they've made us 2 presentations now, which I appreciate their time again, but of course, it's a little biased. And so I'm not even sure I've got a full evaluation of what that looks like if we were to choose that option. K-Tech's the one I can understand the most in some ways, because I understand the agreements with the Meyer family and MOU with all the school districts, and it's bare dirt, and I've been there, I've seen it, I know where the high school's going in, and so that one I can at least get my arms around, it makes sense to me. It's just, here's a spot of dirt and we build it and it costs this much. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer to say I think we have some very fundamental questions to address, and at a minimum, we need a workshop. And if you guys are agreeing with me, or if you think I'm crazy, please tell me right now.
No,
I missed it.
I agree with you, Todd. I think that we need to have a workshop.
Let me wait and recognize the people.
I'm sorry.
Did anybody else have a question? Go ahead.
Okay.
Judy, did you have your hand up?
So I agree with you that first of all, is we have a pretty clear understanding of where our demand is today, because we have kids that go unserved by this institution. And so we know what we need to do and where we need to focus. We currently serve 2 of our PTE classes off campus in some under-qualified square footage. We graduate 100%, we have 100% placement rate. So I consider that is we're serving our people. Now, all of a sudden, that's not good enough where the location is. I think we need to talk about the size of the facility, how many kids we serve, and then we'll fight over where we're going to put it. But I think that we don't know enough, and we haven't come together as a board where we have any idea what the next step is. So I think that I agree with you, is we have to have a workshop that takes our financing options, our building options, what we propose that we want to build, and then go from there. So I think we need another workshop, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. My hope in asking this question tonight was, and I agree that the workshop would be very beneficial, when we get to the workshop, to make sure that we had the information there that we needed in order to have a constructive conversation. And if you think you need a more specific assessment of what the square footage is, other than what we have, or something else, then we ought to get that in advance. But having had this discussion here tonight, I think I'm prepared to set up a workshop and see what happens. Is that the will of the board? Anybody object to that? Okay, we'll set up a workshop.
And Mr. Chairman, I think our goal would be is that at the end of this workshop, we have a recommendation of the square footage, the number of students we're going to serve, and approximately what we think that's going to cost us, so that we can put a stake in the sand instead of just talking about all of the options that are facing us. So,
Judy?
One of the pieces, though, that it sounds like we won't have until August would be some of your economist job prediction folk to say what's ahead, not just for what we have now for students, but the predictions, as I heard you describe, would be kinds of employment, job opportunities that will be in the future, probably specifically in the professional technical. No, what's the new buzzword?
CTE, career and technical.
Career technical education. Okay, we'll practice that. But the whole point is, it's not what we're designing and looking for in a building facility is to figure out what the programs are for now and for the future as best we can predict. And do we have the future numbers with us as we do our workshop?
We'll try and make that part of the workshop. How's that?
That's a good way to do it.
Todd?
Sorry, is anybody else?
No.
Mr. Myers. Sir. Mr. Chairman, with your permission. Mark, or excuse me, Mike. I'm looking at Mark, see Mike. One of the things that I believe the Board of Trustees needs, and this is, I'm not going to say this in the most eloquent fashion, but we need a no-crap assessment of whether or not the Jacqueline facility is amenable to our programs and what it would take to make it so. no emotion, no bias, nobody, I want to be at K-Tech or I want to be in the education corridor. I need it to be looked at in an honest broker way, because I have not seen a proper assessment of that facility and whether or not it really can work or not. I need to know, is it off the list because it just doesn't get there for whatever reasons, and I'd like some rationale behind that. Or, yeah, we could do it, but, or, you know, it's got some really high ceilings and we could land aircraft in there, but, you know, really we could make something happen, you know, and there's ways to do it. I need that assessment, and if you have people that are intimate with that facility, or if they're not, Bruce will walk you guys through it millimeter by millimeter, I'm sure. But I need that for this workshop.
If I may address the board, you know, I think you're absolutely right. There's been some really good thoughts about that building. I don't think it's been properly assessed for the cost. I think you were right about going back in and giving a very, very thorough, what would it cost to build this? It's a very big building, you're right, 10 years into it, that's $8 million. Another, I think it was 7.6 to buy it out, $13.6 million, plus infrastructure and so forth. I don't think that your savings is going to be great, but I don't know. Nobody has really spec'd it out. It is not the same building as CWI built. I was just out there last week. That building was built with a totally different audience in mind. It's an open thing with heating. It was built to be a Sam's Club. Totally different thing. And we're comparing apples and oranges. When you think we're comparing the Jackson facility to that building, I think we're wrong. And I
Agree.
think when you get into the cost, it is not as cheap as you think it would be.
And I'm not even trying to project that it would be cheap. I don't know. One of the things that makes it more challenging is that there's a fairly long laundry list of items that Jacqueline has said that they will step up and do. So part of this is you're having to project and visualize and say, okay, I'm looking at it now, and it is just a shell. You're right, they're storing seed in there. And say, okay, Jacqueline said they're going to do this, 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 and this, and the roads. And I mean, there's a lot that you have to think about that they're committing to, and then where does that put you?
It needs to be costed out. I don't know. And when you get into the architectural design, you may find it's about on par with other construction.
I just want to give it a fair evaluation, because right now I can't evaluate it. I have no idea where it fits.
You're right.
It's a good question. I suspect it's going to take some board resolution, though, to authorize somebody to do a cost analysis of that. And that may be just something that comes out of the workshop. And then we can put that on the table as part of the discussion of the workshop as to whether or not we need to maybe hire somebody to give another independent view of some limited options. So.
Because one of the things Mr. Sir mentioned, as you recall, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that we could do this where we don't necessarily take the whole facility initially. We take a part of it, and we expand as we move. I mean, so there's some different options there. I don't know if that's good or not, you know, because they're even saying, oh, you could take that building, this building, and, you know, Mr. Chairman, we even kind of mused for a moment, well, what if we took the whole site and then you could sublet some of it out and you could have a couple things that could be a revenue source there with a couple of the buildings. I mean, that's an interesting site, and I'm not trying to push that direction. I'm very open-minded, to be honest. I'm kind of all over the board. I'm looking at all three with pros and cons, and I've spent some time out at K-Tech, and I think that's kind of an attractive site for a number of reasons. So I'm just trying to evaluate the different options, I guess.
All right, well, we've got a consensus of the board that we'll set up a workshop, and we'll try and find an appropriate date to do that at everybody's convenience. Any remarks for the good of the order? Judy?
Two. One was the invitation we have for the practical nursing pinning ceremony. Congratulations to them. And then a couple of articles, one of which I just want to highlight tonight because of our topic of education and future students. In the Trustee Quarterly for Spring 2013, the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence was awarded to Walla Walla Community College, not too far away. The magic of what they did, though, I thought was interesting for our community college, and that is the president worked with his senior team to focus on training students for high-paying jobs that the community needs. To do so, college officials analyze job and wage projections, here's where we are on programs, and conduct feasibility studies to weigh the value of prospective programs. When analysis showed that the region could absorb at least twice as many nurses, and I'm suspecting that would be a theme here, that the current community college was producing, It doubled the nursing program. Irrigation instruction shifted from farms towards lawns and sports fields because that was where the work had moved. A new energy program provides technicians for the area's growing stock of wind turbines. And it goes on. But after our discussion tonight with IBE, our talking about PTE, there may be some more things we can learn both from Walla Walla, and it just reminds us it's really up to us to figure this out.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to piggyback very quickly on Judy's mentioning the practical nurse pinning, the LPN. That is going to be right in this room on Monday, July 8th at 6 p.m. And I was able to make it to the RN pinning, and that was a tremendous ceremony and was a real blessing to be involved with. And that was over at Boswell Hall and Schuler Auditorium, and it was just tremendous, well attended. I'm understanding this one will be a little more intimate and might be a little more crowded, but I think everybody that wants to attend is more than welcome. And it's quite an experience to watch these people be recognized and the accomplishment and achievement that they've attained. So I encourage anybody to come to that. It's like I said, I know the RN was a wonderful experience. I'm supposing this one will be too.
Any other remarks for the good of the order?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just very briefly, I wanted to introduce, I know most of you know Tammy Haft, our registrar, who's here representing her boss tonight, Graydon Stanley. She was not only tasked with keeping the two of us in line tonight, but the rest of you, and I think she's done quite well. And back to our celebrating success and Marcia Need's efforts with the Cardinal card. I want you folks to know just the role that gentleman sitting in the back row, Steve Ruppel, and the IT folks played there. Steve's team worked extremely hard on that and reports under Ron's area, and I just wanted you folks to realize that Steve's folks had a real hand in that as well. So.
Very cool.
Yep. Does that mean they're playing with a full deck of cards now?
Thank you very much. If there are no more remarks, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Congratulations, Steve.